Hi guys, my name is Maria and welcome to my channel. Since I know myself, I had a very big dream of building my own successful business, but honestly I didn't know where to start, what I should do first. This is why I decided to build this YouTube channel where I can help thousands of people like me who are willing to relocate to the US, change their lives, and be the owners of their own businesses here. My channel is going to be all about business ideas and all the possible ways you can relocate to the US too. Today's video will help you understand how investing money into the US economy will open the door to this country, not only for you, but for your entire family and even for your beloved pets. For the purpose of this video, I went all the way down to Miami, to the sunshine Miami, yes. And I had an interview with an amazing immigration lawyer, and he is the founder of the AmLaw Group. In that interview, we dive in deeply and give you a large overview of what is E2 visa and how you can apply for it today. Make sure you stick around till the end because this video will be filled with a lot of valuable information. Before we start, please make sure you subscribe to my channel, and also if you can make me a favor, hit that like button. That way many people like you can come and find this video easily and hopefully get their lives changed soon. Are you ready? Then let's get started. I would like to introduce you to Charles Raether. He is the founding attorney of AmLaw Group based here in Miami, Florida. And he has a very long expertise, over 20 years in immigration and corporate law. Okay, Charles, so let's get to the juicier part of our interview and let's discuss some more about the E2 visa. So if you could give me like an overview, what is E2 visa?
Well, the E2 visa is a very economical, reliable, and relatively inexpensive way to get status in the U.S. It's much faster than getting a green card, and the approval rate is very high. So the vast majority of our clients who file for the E2 get it. Generally what it requires is opening or buying a business in the U.S., making an investment, and operating the business.
Okay, so basically the requirements is to buy a business and invest 100 at least.
Sure. Well, the requirements are you have to invest about $100,000 or more. You can invest that by either buying a controlling share of an existing business, so you have to have control, 50% or more, or you could open a new business that you own and invest $100,000 into that. As far as other requirements, there's also a requirement of having profitability. There's no specific minimal amount of profit you need to make, but I would say from our experience, we have to show the company's making probably $30,000 or $40,000 net profit every year or more. If it's less than that, then the immigration service might say this isn't a business, it's more like a hobby. You're not really generating much income, and it's not worthy of an E2. Besides that, though, there's really no requirements to hire people. Usually most of our E2 clients have maybe 1 or 2 employees, but it's not required. And otherwise, you just have to show that the business is successfully operating in order to extend your E2 when you need to.
Okay, sounds great. And if we talk about the European countries and about the Asian countries, how likely they are going to be approved for that E2 visa?
Well, one other item that I forgot to mention is that also to qualify for the E2, your country that you're coming from has to have an E2 treaty with the U.S. So not every country has a treaty. For example, China, Russia, some other large countries do not have an E2 treaty. But assuming they do have an E2 treaty, European countries, very high likelihood of getting approved, especially Western Europe. Very few denials, so I think your chances are very good. Asian countries, it just really depends on a lot of factors. If we look at Japan, for example, it's a very well-developed economy, and there generally are not problems with Japanese overstaying their visas in the U.S., so generally consular officers are pretty liberal and lenient about granting the E2, so I think the chances are very good.
Okay, that sounds great. And so you are the main attorney at the AmLaw Group. So is your company helping to open the companies, the entity, legal entity here in US? If for example, the investor wants to open a company here, are you going to provide a guidance?
Sure, we provide pretty much full turnkey service with our clients for the E2. If they just want the legal immigration work done, we can do that. If they need assistance in finding the business that they can invest in, we also do that. We're very active with franchises as well lately because franchises offer a large number of opportunities for E2s, and so we actually are members in a certain franchise association. So if our client is interested in a franchise, we can help provide some of those options. We certainly also help in terms of registering the company, getting the tax ID. We can assist with finding the office space that might be required, and everything else that a client might need to launch everything.
Okay. And you mentioned about the minimum amount to be invested. So you said it's kind of 100,000. So this is kind of a law. It's written in the law that it should be 100, or it's something you think?
It's just based on our personal experience. There's no specific number in the law, unlike, say, the EB-5 program. There, it specifically has a certain dollar amount. Can't be a dollar less than that. With the E2, it's vague. So we keep it open, and it depends on circumstances too. So if the client's investing less than 100,000, but otherwise they have a very strong business plan or a very strong business that's already generating a lot of money, then I think it's not going to be a problem. So they could invest maybe 90 something, possibly even 80 something. Yeah. But again, the more the amount goes down, the higher the possible risk of a denial, or the higher the risk that they're going to check other things to confirm that this is really a viable business that's going to generate good profit. So for example, you're investing only $60,000. How likely is it investing $60,000 you're going to be able to generate, say, $30,000-$40,000 in net income a year? Chances are probably pretty low. But again, if you can prove that either in your business plan or actual operations, then if the investment amount is lower than what we recommend, it should be okay.
For example, if I'm an IT company, I develop some software, so I don't really need much inventory. Just it's more buying some softwares and then it's service based. So
with service based companies, those sometimes are a problem because you still need to commit and invest the money. So there's different ways of getting around that. Sometimes we might say, or clients might do this. They might, for example, they might invest in the office. They might not just rent an office, they might buy office space. And so that's an investment. They might have to pay several $100,000 to get that, but we can kind of count that towards the investment amounts. You're also allowed to take into account other contracts you might have for that 100,000. So for example, IT company, they're not going to buy inventory, they're not selling products, but they will have to probably hire some employees, for example. They might have to sign some contracts with some subcontractors to perform certain work for them. So we also provide those contracts as well. And so if there's a labor agreement, they're hiring an employee for $50,000 a year. Well, we can show the agreement. Here's what the employee, they're going to have to spend $50,000 on his salary.
Even if it's in the future.
If it's in the future, yeah. They'll take a look generally at the next 12 months of those expenses. So you might say, here's our employment agreement. This is what I'm going to have to spend for this employee for the next 12 months. Here's the lease agreement. This is what I'm going to have to spend for the next 12 months. Here's a programming contract we've had with the subcontractor that they're going to help develop part of our program or software, and we're going to pay them $25,000 to do this kind of work. That also counts towards the 100,000.
Okay, that's how. So basically, he doesn't have to spend all those monies in one way. It's just under the contract.
You have to commit them. We use the word commit. So the funds don't have to be completely spent. If they're committed based on contracts, that works.
Okay. So another question is, so once the company is open and the investor has the bank account and he has transferred the money into this bank account, is there a rule that have to spend all of those money prior to submit the petition to the...
No, absolutely not. So let's say the client opens a bank account, transfers $100,000 into the company's account. From our general experience, again, this is not in the law, but it's just our general experience. It's probably good for the client to actually spend maybe 50, 60%, maybe 70% of the money he transferred. So if he transferred 100, it's probably good to spend 60 to 70,000 by the time we file the E2. The remaining money can still be in the bank account, and as long as we can show some other contracts, obligations, lease agreements, employment agreements, that will require him to spend that remaining 30,000 in the course of the year, that should be fine. But if instead the client, let's say, transfers 100,000 and only spends 10,000 by the time of the filing, that's a little suspicious, because the embassy might say, well, you're only really investing $10,000. This other 90,000 is still in your bank account. You could just take it off and take it back and walk away.
Basically, you have to put your money at risk.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and maybe I'm an investor, but I have a family. So I have a wife and I have 2 kids. So I am allowed to take them along with me.
Yes,
under
absolutely.
that visa?
Yeah, so if you have a spouse, a husband, wife, and children, you can take them along. They go together with you on your same application, provided the children are under 21 and not married. And here's the other thing too. It's not necessary for your spouse and children to have a qualifying passport. So for example, like I said, with Russia there's no treaty. So let's say your spouse and kids have Russian passports, but the main investor has a Romanian or German passport. That's sufficient to get the E2 for everybody. So what's important is just that the investor have the qualifying passport.
Okay, and then basically all of them come under the same petition along with me.
That's correct.
And if my kids are married and they are, for example, 20, then
it's not going to work out.
It's not going to work. So they have
better to tell them to hold off on their marriage till after they're 21.
Okay. So does the holder of the E2 visa need a social security number and a work permit?
The holder of the E2 qualifies to get a social security number, and I think 99% of our clients do get the social, because there's advantages to having the social security number, obviously, in America. So once they have the E2 approval and they first come to the U.S., then they can go to the Social Security Administration
by
themselves and get the number. The same goes for the spouse as well. So the spouse also has a right to get a social, and the spouse can get a work permit. So the main investor is allowed only to work for his or her company that he's investing in. So he doesn't really get a work permit because he's tied to that company. The spouse, for example, if it's a wife, she is allowed to get a work permit, and she also, of course, can get the Social Security number. And with the work permit, she can work anywhere she wants.
And she can go and be hired in some
anywhere she wants, And actually, literally, just earlier in November of this year, they changed the process such that spouses for the e-visas and a few other visas don't have to file separate paperwork now to get the work permit. It's automatic. So when they get the visa, that serves, to our understanding, this is just literally a couple weeks ago, this rule came out, but in the visa, it'll indicate that they have work authorization. So that really saves time and money for clients, because in the past, they'd come to America, they'd have a legal visa, but they'd have to wait till they got the work permit, and sometimes that could take 6 months or longer. So now they get the work permit when they get the visa, and then they can go immediately get the Social Security number and then go
So it's the same paper, basically.
Basically, yeah.
And what about the kids? Do they get the work permit?
No, unfortunately, children cannot get a work permit. They can't work under the E2. But they can, the benefits for the children are, they're treated as residents, just like American citizens, for purposes of schools and education. So, for example, your kids, if they're younger, they can go to any school, public school, if they'd like. For free. If they want to go to university and they're old enough to go to university, they're treated as residents for tuition purposes. So, as you know, if you go to a government-owned university or community college, residents of that state pay much less than non-residents. So, like for example, here in Florida, if you want to go to the University of Florida, I think for a year it costs maybe $7,000 for tuition, which is very cheap by American standards. If you're not a resident of Florida, you have to pay, I think, $30,000 or even more per year. So, but as long as your kids have that E2 status, they're treated as local residents, and you can save a lot of money on that.
Okay, so they don't have to be like residents for 1 year.
Well, that's the thing. You still have to, even if you are a U.S. citizen, let's say you move from California to Florida, you'd have to live in Florida for 1 year before you qualify for that.
As a resident.
So, as a resident. So the same is true for E2. So that first year, you've got to live here. But after you're here a year, then you can qualify.
Okay, understood. For how long is the E2 visa granted? So I know that, for example, United Kingdom residents, it's granted for 16 months. But for how long is their status?
So yeah, that's a good point. There's a difference between the visa and the status for the E2. So the visa, how long the visa is good for depends on the country. So let's say UK, Canada, Romania, Armenia,
Czech Republic.
probably Czech Republic. They get it for, I'm not so sure about the Czech Republic. They get it for 5 years, up to 5 years. Okay, maybe Czech Republic does also for 5 years. That's how long the visa is good for. But the status means every time you enter the US, how long can you stay here for each time? So for everybody, it's always 2 years. The status is 2 years. So even if you have a Ukrainian E2 visa, for Ukrainians, unfortunately, the visa is only good for 90 days. And it's only a one-time entry. So that means Ukrainian, once he got his visa, he's got to come to the U.S. within 90 days or else the visa expires. But once he gets here, he's going to get the same 2 years as a British person, a Canadian, a German, and stuff like that. So what that means is the visa might expire, but that doesn't matter. As long as you have the status for 2 years, they don't care. So you can enter the U.S., even if your visa expires tomorrow. You enter the U.S. with your E2, they'll give you 2 years here in the U.S.
And if I'm British and I came here and I stayed 2 years, then I have to leave and just enter again?
Well, yes. If you're here for 2 years and you never leave the U.S., then at the end of that period, you have to either extend your status by filing paperwork with USCIS
just on inside of
inside
the US.
the country, or you have to leave the U.S. and just come back the next day, and they'll give you another 2 years.
Okay,
So
on the border.
Yeah, on the border. Yeah. So if your visa is still valid, it's probably faster and cheaper just to leave and come back. Because if you file here with USCIS, you got to get a lot of paperwork ready.
Again.
You have to pay the fees, the government fees. You have to pay a lawyer. It's just expensive. It's just much cheaper. You could just fly to Canada and come back the next day.
So let's say everything is ready for my E2 visa. So I've prepared all the documentation, I have submitted to you, and everything is ready. So, and I am, let's say, Romanian. I have to go to my embassy and go through an interview. How long does it take for me to get that visa? So I'm going to get the answer straight away, or?
So if you're overseas, we send the petition directly to the embassy. How long it takes them to review it depends on the embassy. And because of COVID, it's taken a lot longer than it used to. In the past, it was relatively quick, maybe a month or so. Now, it's very hard to say, and it really depends on the embassy. Canada, for example, has taken a long time. This year, being 2021, our clients were waiting 4, 5, 6 months to get an interview in Canada. Kazakhstan, for example, it's been much faster. Maybe 1 or 2 months they'd have to wait. Romania, I can't say right off the top of my head how long it would take. But I would say in general, they probably get to E2 applicants within 2 months on average. So that means we send the documents in. You take your place in line. They will then tell you when to come in for the interview. And like I said, hopefully it's within 2 months or so, and you come in for the interview. Now, I should say with the interviews for the E2s, they're pretty important. Not to say that other visa interviews are not important, but with E2s in particular, they tend to ask specific questions about the business, about your plans, and about why you feel confident that the business is going to grow and why you think you're going to be able to grow the business. And it's almost a bit of a psychological test. They want to see how you can answer, how assured you are about how confident you are in your answers. Because if they feel like you're not too confident, you don't know what you're talking about, and you don't know your business too well, it likely could lead to a denial.
And you have invested 100,000.
Yeah, so it could be a problem. So you want to make sure you do really well on the interviews. Clients always ask us, if we guarantee that they get their visa and stuff like that. But the thing is, we don't know.
Yes, how you're going to perform.
How you're going to perform. It's a bit of a performance. What you're going to say to the officer, and we don't know. They might have some questions about some things that we don't think are important, but they might, direct their attention to it. And so it's hard to say exactly what they're going to ask you during the interview. We certainly can work with our clients to kind of prepare them in general. But we never know for sure what questions, are going to come up.
And we never know the mood of that.
Unfortunately, it depends on the mood of the officer too.
Okay, so now let's talk about the rejections. You said there is not much like the rejection in that E2 visas, but again, if there is a rejection and I have already invested those money into the US economy, so what is my plan B, or what should I do in that case?
Yeah, what's your plan B? Well, the good news is, clients ask us, what's the denial rate? And I would say for our practice and doing this over 10 years, our denial rate is about 1 or 2%. So it's very, very small. And interestingly enough, all those denials that we've had were always at the embassies. Yeah. So that tells you how important and how unpredictable sometimes the interviews go. We've never had a denial for somebody who filed here in the U.S. So it's just easier because there's no interview, and we can kind of control the process as lawyers, and we can see exactly how to handle everything. Yes. But nonetheless, even those denials we've had, like I said, it's about 1 or 2% of a denial rate, which is very low, generally speaking. What's the plan B if you get a denial? Well, I agree. That can be a problem. If the client's already invested the money, maybe already started operations, leaves the U.S. to get the visa, tries to get back and gets a denial, it can be a problem. It can be a problem. So I can't, sugarcoat that and make it sound nicer than it is. What can the client do? Ideally, I guess I would say if the client has to leave to get the interview, and just to make sure everything's safe, make sure you've got people you can trust here.
Like a manager.
Yeah, manager, partner, somebody like that, who can kind of still at least keep things going if for some reason you're stuck overseas for a while. Now, if you get a denial, you can always reapply at the embassy, but it kind of depends on the reason for the denial. Why, right? Because if it's something it's difficult for you to fix, well, you could reapply in a week, but if you haven't changed anything, then that's not really going to help too much. And the worst reason for denial is if they think you don't show enough ties to your home country. Meaning, if they think you're going to stay and live in the U.S. and you're not going to come back to your home country in the future. Because how do you prove that, right? That's all subjective. It's in your head. Yes. And there's no document you could provide to them to say, look, here, I promise that I'm going to come back to my home country. There's just no way to prove that. So that's the biggest problem. If the problem is more like you haven't showed that the company's profitable or that you've invested enough money, well, you can change that. You could invest some more money. You could wait a couple months, get some more profit, generate some more earnings, and then provide financial statements to the embassy later and say, look, profits have grown 20% in the last 2 months since I was last here. So again, it depends on the reason for the denial, but I agree. If you've got a business here and you're stuck overseas somewhere, it can be a challenge.
Yeah, so then it's much easier to apply from inside the US, but again, for the European countries, they have ESTA, which means they don't have a chance to change their status. So
yes, very good point.
I think they may come by ESTA to do some operational things like set up a bank account, set up a business, but then they have to come back to their home countries and apply from the embassy. Right. But for example, if they come by a student visa and then in the due time they decide that they want to be investors and they want to open a business, then there is a way
that would work
to change the status, and so they don't have to go through this interview. Right. And it's much likely.
Yeah, for Western Europeans it's a little bit more of a challenge because if they have ESTA and come without a visa, you're right, they can't change their status here. So that's a bit of a downside for Western Europeans.
But again, it's good, but they can come very quick and easy here and do some setup, and it's much easier for them.
But the thing is also, if they get a denial, I believe this is the case, and I don't want to be overly pessimistic, but if they get a denial for the E2, then I don't think they can continue to use the ESTA.
Yes.
Because ESTA requires you to have no denials, I think, for any kind of visas. So if but again, thinking about that, I don't think we've ever had a client who was from a Western European country with ESTA who ever got a denial for E2. I mean, as far as I can recall, that wasn't the case. So, like I said, with the Western Europeans, it's a little bit easier, a little more liberal to get the E2.
So we said, for example, in case the investor got a deny in the embassy and the business is left here in the US and let's say he has a very good friend and this friend is the manager here. Is there a way that this business is going to work and all the investments coming from that business go back into the business until he reaches the limit of $500,000 and then he can apply for EB-5? Could that work?
Sure, that's an option, of course. That's certainly an option. I mean, as of today, the EB-5 amount is $500,000.
Yes.
It's quite possible it's going to increase again in the future, but we don't know. But as of today, it's $500,000. So that's one possibility, that if the client invests, say, 100,000 in an E2 business, and then he uses the income or the profits from that business to then invest as an EB5, he can do that. But there's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing it, when you're doing this approach.
Yes.
The investor has to take the money out of the company and reinvest it. So let's say the company earned 50,000 this year. He's got to take the money out, pay taxes on it, and then put it back in as an individual. So there's some tax consequences. So you have to take the money out of the company, which usually will trigger some taxes that they have to pay, but it's a requirement for the EB5.
And then over the few years, if he reaches that amount, then he can again go through the embassy interview and
as an EB5 candidate.
As an EB5.
And it just depends on the situation. EB5 takes a long time, 2 to 3 years. So that also takes a lot of time. Some people, they don't want to wait that long to come back and take care of their business or move to the U.S. So what I would say, we can always reapply for the E2 if there is a denial. But it just depends on the situation, what details or information is needed to, reapply and make an evaluation as to, how quickly he should reapply and what are the chances. Because here's one thing I also want to mention. I know when people get a denial, whether it's an E2 or for a tourist visa, their immediate reaction is to, okay, I'm going to refile. We're going to appeal this, I'm going to quick refile. But that's usually the worst thing that you can do, because the embassy, they don't like it when they see people filing multiple petitions very close to each other.
So just to give an overview, E2 visa is a non-immigrant visa, which doesn't lead you to a green card. But in case you reinvest the money until you reach that limit of, let's say, 500, like now, 500,000, then you can apply for a green card.
Correct.
For entire family. So EB5 visa, it's an immigration visa. And maybe to give some overview, what is an EB5 requirements in general?
Sure. So what the EB5 is, it's similar to the E2. It just has more requirements. So you have to invest a minimum amount of money. That amount right now is 500,000. We suspect in 2022 it's going to go up to probably 700,000, but we don't know. We'll see. So right now it's 500,000, which is a very good price. So you have to invest at least that minimum amount, 500,000, and you also have to create 10 new jobs. So for each investor, so if it's just yourself in your own business, then you have to create 10 new jobs and hire 10 people. Now you don't have to hire those 10 people right away. We just have to show that by the time that your first conditional green card ends, which is after 2 years, that you've hired the 10 people. So the time frame is basically as follows. We get the petition ready, we show that you've invested the money, we prepare the other documents, and you file the petition. Right now, as of today, it's taken about 2.5 years to process everything, maybe a little more.
If it's processing from outside the U.S. or...
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, wherever you're located. So you could be here on an E2, you might be overseas waiting. It's about 30 months waiting time. Once you get that approval, after that 30 months, you get an approval for a temporary green card, or conditional green card, as we call it. That conditional green card works for 2 years. By the end of that 2-year period, that's when you have to hire the 10 new employees. So you don't have to hire the people way at the beginning when you first filed, and you don't even have to hire them, when you first get the approval, but you have to hire them by the time that first 2-year period is over.
You said the green card is only for 2 years, and then after 2 years there is like a reviewing?
Yes, so after 2 years they review to see whether you've met all the criteria or conditions. So they look at whether you've invested the money, did you actually put the money in the business and build the business, and did you create the new jobs. If you meet those requirements, then they'll give you a permanent green card, and that one's valid for 10 years. And you're eligible to file for a passport or citizenship 5 years after you receive the first green card. So you get that first one for 2 years. Yeah, it's temporary. Then 3 years after that go by, then you can file for a passport or citizenship.
For entire family, basically.
Yeah, for the entire
spouse
family.
And kids under 21, unmarried.
Well, so the spouse and kids, under 21 as well. But when you're doing the EB5, what's important to remember is you just have to file for the first green card before the child turns 21. Let's say you file today, and your child turns 21 in 6 months. But we know it's going to take 2.5 years to get the approval, and then after that, the green card. But you're okay. So the child, even though by that time might be 23, 24, you're still okay as long as you first filed
before that
21.
Okay. And other question. I understood that E2 is only for 2 years. Basically, the status here is for 2 years. So after that, if I want to reapply, how many times I can reapply for?
Well, that's a good thing about E2. There's no limit. There's no limit how many times you extend.
So even can live here for 10 years based on E2 status?
Yeah, and there's a lot of Europeans that do that, a lot of Brits that come here, and they can live here for 10, 20 years. As long as you can show the business is still operating, generating pretty good income and stuff like that, there's no limitations.
So every 2 years there is a new application and a new...
Well, every 2 years is a new application if you don't leave the country during that time. So if you have a visa, so let's say you were here, let's say you came January 1st.
Yes.
You didn't leave at all for 2 years, and it's December 31st. And tomorrow, your 2-year period expires. If you leave the country and then come back the next day, that 2-year clock starts all over again. So usually people still have a visa available to them. They still have a visa in the passport. So if your visa is still in your passport and you travel in and out, that 2-year period, you could extend it to 4 years or maybe even longer, just depending how often you travel, and they reset that clock for the 2-year period.
Of course, and for example, if my visa ends in 5 years and I left once, like after 2 years, and then I left again after 2 years, and then I left. So
you could stay here maybe kind of for about 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay, understood. So it's only for those who has the 60-month visa.
Well, yeah. So some people like from Kazakhstan, they only have a visa for 1 year.
Yes.
So in that case, you could kind of stretch it out to maybe 3 years. So you have the visa that's good for a year, and let's say you come right before your visa ends, and you stay for 2 years. So you get 1 year when the visa is working, and then 2 years at the end there for the status. So you can kind of stretch it a little bit. Yeah.
Think it around. Okay. I think I am very satisfied and grateful for your time and for the answers, and I hope all our YouTubers, viewers will be satisfied as well.
Sure, absolutely. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have in the future.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So now you clearly understand what is an E2 visa, who can obtain it, how is the process, and also who is eligible to get it. And I have some great news for you. Me and AmLaw Group decided to give you a promo code. It's Maria10, and this promo code will give you a very juicy and sweet discount, so make sure you use it. If you are ready to make your first step towards your dream and you have the ability to be that investor and you want to apply for E2 visa today, then don't hesitate. Check the description box, hit the link and leave your inquiry. Just don't forget to mention the promo code Maria10. That promo code will give you a 10% discount for the entire immigration package they offer for a limited time only. It's gonna save you a lot, I promise. Guys, make sure you subscribe, also hit the notification bell so that way you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Also, if you can make me a favor, hit that like button, that way I can help more people like you who are looking to change their lives. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Please don't be shy, leave me your comments down below and let me know if that video was helpful, and see you soon. Bye!